it to Miami Dolphins. The pressure, he's in trouble. Loses the football. Touchdown! Got it! You have got to be kidding me. Jalen Waddle. It's a Dolphin touchdown. Throwing deep upfield on the near side. Man open. Touchdown! Looking deep. He's got a man. Touchdown! The run from Tua Tagovailoa. Touchdown! He's going deep. He's got it for a touchdown again. Touchdown! Beautiful day to be a Dolphin fan. Let's go!
What is good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason, and we are back here for another one. Today, I'm joined by the great Daniel Oyefusi from the Miami Herald. Sir, thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you again. Can't wait to talk ball.
Yeah, likewise, man. It's been a minute, so thanks for having me, Reason.
And I got to say, guys, I'm subscribed to the Miami Herald because of Daniel and Barry Jackson's work. I'm also subscribed to Sun Central because David does a great job. I'm telling you guys, I know everyone, the audience here for a sec, you guys like to be informed. You guys like film work. You guys like to know the nuance of the game. Daniel is the one to read when it comes to that stuff. He does film breakdown articles. They're always fantastic. So I know I've talked to you about that, how much I love that before, but I gotta shout it out because you're really one of the only few people, if only person, who does this in this community, especially from the South Florida media, aspect. So man, gotta respect the grind, man. I think. Listen, I'm gonna prop you up a little bit, Daniel. Fans love when they're talked. I think they like hearing from people who have high football IQs that really they can trust. They know what they're talking about. And when you put out those articles, Daniel, and you break things down, you really prove to this fan base over and over again how much you are worth following and how much you are worth listening to. So you're always one of the people I prop up on the show. So I just want to get that out of the way because I do appreciate the work you put in because not many do it in the South Florida media like you. So thank you, sir.
No, I appreciate that, man. It really means a lot.
So let's get into it, man. I know we've only had one day, well, 2 days, but one day you were at OTAs. I mean, the buzz is palpable right now. I mean, you look at the Heat, you look at the Panthers, and the Dolphins, for a team that's basically in the underwear Olympics, they're not that far away. I mean, look at we just started. We're almost already 200 people in the room here. How are you? What's the buzz down there when you were just on, before we get into player specific stuff, what was the buzz just when you were down on the field and everything? What was the energy like down there?
Yeah, I mean, anytime, like, I say this is like the first time you really get to see like some iteration of the 2023 Dolphins. You go through the offseason where you have free agency, you have the draft, you get to rookie mini camp, but we didn't see too much of that. It's just one day that we saw and just kind of some individual warm-ups and whatnot. But now you get to see, like, for the most part, some veterans not participating and whatnot. But you get to see like the first iteration of the 2023 Dolphins. So that's always exciting. It's like kind of the slow return to football. And obviously with the Dolphins, there's a lot of intrigue. First time we're seeing Tua in several months on a real football field working with his team. Obviously the additions on defense. There's a lot of different things to kind of keep your eye on. Like I was kind of like, I feel like I gotta like work my way back into like peak form, kind of like the Dolphins do, because it's like I'm scanning the field, I'm looking for the offensive lineman, the defensive lineman, the quarterbacks. So it's definitely a fun time.
The first unit I want to ask you about is obviously the most concerned, and I think why people are so concerned and stressing on this, Daniel, is because they look at our depth chart, and this is the one glaring unit. We upgraded inside linebacker. I think even Aubrey Miller, I expect something out of him, even the special teams contribution. But we've upgraded interior linebacker, David Long, et cetera, et cetera. But you look at the offensive line, and I think why fans are so harping on it, not only because you got content creators and you got journalists like yourself who point it out to everyone and make it so obvious, but also because I think a lot of people look at this roster, Daniel, and they're like, this is one of the most complete rosters Dolphin fans have seen since Dan Marino. And they're saying to themselves, if you just fix that, we could potentially be unstoppable, right? What are your thoughts on the unit right now?
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying it for several months. I mean, I think that the Dolphins 2023 season will kind of be maybe kind of decided on two measures. You know, one being health of Tua Tagovailoa and whether he can stay healthy for the duration of the season and when it matters most. And second is really the decision to kind of double down, triple down on their faith in the young offensive linemen, Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg. You know, there were offensive linemen out there and, you know, the first wave of free agency that they could have targeted. They obviously didn't draft one with one of their first 2 or 3, 4 picks. You know, they only had 4 in the draft, but, you know, they didn't draft one until the 7th round with Ryan Hayes. And, you know, Chris Greer said it, you know, at the pre-draft press conference that the expectation is Austin Jackson will be the starting right tackle. And you know, I tend to believe him until I see otherwise. So, you know, it's funny because, you know, Tua's health kind of goes hand in hand with the offensive line and how they perform. And it's like, all right, like if you can just lock down those 2 spots, and I'm not saying that like Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg have to be all Pro Bowl level talents, but if you can be an above average starter, NFL starter, that really rounds out that group. And, you know, the sky really is the limit. Like for all the strides they made in 2022 with Mike McDaniel and Tua and Tyreek and Jalen, like there's still like a next level they can reach, honestly, in terms of the consistency of their performance. I think that getting, you know, off Austin Jackson and Liam to play like their draft status would go, you know, would just do so much for that group. So, you know, obviously they brought in Isaiah Wynn, Cedric Oyefusi. We'll see how those guys fit in. I think both of them are fighting for roster spots. As Austin Jackson is like Austin Jackson clearly, like he's going to get every single inch of that leash possible to get to really secure that starting spot. Like he has to be like awful and a clear upgrade with somebody else for him not to be the starting right tackle in my eyes, for better or for worse. And then kind of the same thing with Liam Eichenberg. So we'll see how that goes, you know, as the offseason and then the season comes.
We're going to dive into this. Before we do, Craig Bryan says, reason I don't catch you live a lot of times, but when I do, I share the wealth. Thank you for the great content and the awesome guests. Keep up the amazing work. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, let's talk about this for a sec. You know, this is what keeps me awake at night, Daniel. I know you're a film guy. I'm a film guy. We know Mike McDaniel's like the epitome of a film guy.
I feel like I don't want to be lumped with a film guy and McDaniel's a film. If I'm a film guy, I don't know.
Yeah, I know. He's like he's the epitome of a film guy. But what I'm saying here is the film doesn't lie to an extent. All right. Like I've always been a true believer. If you go back, you know, to the 2020 pre-draft, some of the first videos I did on this channel, because I started in March 2020, was an offensive tackle big board, and Austin Jackson was my OT 10. Okay. Listen, I get the great story behind the bone marrow. Fantastic. You look at the USC, right? You kind of look at where the conference he comes from, not really known for producing high quality tackles historically. Okay. But you look at Austin Jackson, I get it. I knew Mike McDaniel would say I can make that work because you look at the traits. He had a lot of the traits that fit what you want to do when you outside zone scheme. But then you shift to Liam Eichenberg, and he doesn't have the traits. He doesn't have the quick feet. You know, he's not athletically sound, right? You look at him and you look at all of his flaws, the T-Rex arms, you look at everything. You basically need to be almost a flawless technician to be what you were asking him to be, an above average, or as I like the word I use, just please be competent at the position. That's all I'm asking him to be, right? Yeah. And he's got to be so flawlessly sound to, like, when I look at Isaiah Wynn, this is my opinion, because I know you can't talk about where people are lined up, and I'm not trying to put you in a spot, but I look at Isaiah Wynn, and I look at McDaniel, and I look at this situation, and it just says to me, okay, he seems like a guy where you look at what he did at Georgia. You know, people have been gatekeeping where he plays at left tackle, but they seem to be forgetting, Daniel, that Joe Thuney was already at left guard when he was drafted to New England, who was an all-pro guard, even though he'd only been there for a year or two prior. But I digress. That's why Dante Scarnecchia didn't move Wynn to left guard, even Michael Onwenu when they drafted him out of Michigan, right? Left guard, but they played him at right guard because Tooney was there. They haven't moved him to left guard since Tooney left. You see where I'm going with this? Anyways, I look at this and I'm like, Wynn can beat Eichenberg. I think he can beat him soundly at left guard. And then you look at Teron Armstead. Could the idea maybe be compete with Liam Eichenberg at left guard and fill in for Teron Armstead if he misses time? And then would that make Cedric Ogbuehi probably the primary competition for Austin Jackson? I mean, how do you see this offensive line working out? Because they paid him almost all the cap they have in terms of Isaiah Wynn, Daniel. They paid him almost all the cap they had before it frees up on June 1st. They gave him almost $3 million, right? So, and we haven't paid our draft class yet. So how do you see this whole offensive? Do you think Isaiah Wynn's going to be competing for a starting job? Because I even noticed he didn't give you guys any answers when you guys flat out asked.
Yeah, he didn't, and Mike McDaniel didn't really. I mean, he just said that he's gonna cross train in multiple spots. It's interesting. I find it interesting. I feel like coaches and players, they tell you a lot about what they do say, but also about what they don't say. Like when we asked Mike McDaniel whether Skylar Thompson and Mike White were going to compete for the backup spot, he made it very clear they're going to there were no if fans or buts about it. No half stepping around it. Like they're gonna compete. Whereas, you ask about Austin Jackson, to an extent Liam Eichenberg, and it's like, all right, we believe very strongly in them and whatnot. I don't think that they really ever faced competition last year. I mean, not in my eyes. It was very clear from day one that they were going to be the starters. And, obviously they were kind of playing new spots. But it was very clear early on to me that there wasn't going to be much competition. I'm interested to see if there is now, but again, I think that in the case of Austin Jackson, he's a first-round pick, regardless of what prior evaluations you had of him. I mean, the Dolphins invested a lot into him, and again, they're going to ride it out to the very end. Obviously, this is the last year of his rookie contract because they didn't pick up the option, and we'll see what happens there. Eichenberg is kind of in a similar boat too. I think he's entering year 3 now.
Yeah.
So again, like when you invest so much in terms of draft capital, you trade up for Eichenberg and then draft him in the 3rd round, I believe. I'm not saying it's fair, but
I agree.
The Dolphins have a lot of incentive to make sure that these are the guys who are, who pan out and are successful. So it doesn't surprise me if, they get a lot of reps in a certain spot and they're not, giving the vets, some of these new guys some as many reps too, because they got to make it work with those. I don't know if the Dolphins will be better if, let's say Isaiah Wynn is starting at a certain spot or Cedric.
I think if you stick him in between Connor Williams and Teron Armstead, you might have a deadly left side right there, I think.
Potentially, but it's like, again, like you say, like you said, like you think that he can soundly beat Eichenberg. I feel like that's what it has to be, like in order for them to kind of get unseated. Because I just don't know if it's going to be a real competition.
Are you a Jay-Z fan?
Yeah, I'm a Jay-Z fan.
Okay, you remember Reasonable Doubt? One of my favorite songs on that, Politics as Usual, all right? And that's what I get, where I everything you said is 110% right. I get, where it's at. The thing that, and you don't, listen, I'm going to try and get you in hot water. I'm just going to give you my opinion here. What really makes me feel like it's Greer pressing those buttons is you look at McDaniel, how quick he was to cut bait with Chase Edmonds. And Chase Edmonds was one of his first moves, and he raved about him and how he watched him. McDaniel was quick to rectify his mistakes, while Greer, it kind of felt like a little of that Flores trickle effect, where Flores wasn't quick to rectify his mistakes either. And it kind of felt like Greer, that's one of the things maybe they saw eye to eye with. And that's why, I'm just hoping Frank Smith and Butch Barry and McDaniel get one of these guys in. They beat out Eichenberg or Jackson, and they say, see, hey, we can turn these guys like we did with Trent Williams. We can turn guys you might think are done, like Isaiah Wynn is where I'm going with this. We can turn him into a viable starter, like a first-round pedigree who's got the traits of a first-round pedigree, which is why I get they're working on Jackson a bit more. But Eichenberg, brother, I just don't see the anchor. I don't see the functional strength. I don't see the arm length. I don't see the ability to operate in a phone booth. I don't see the footwork. Do you see where I'm going? Like, I just don't. You know what I mean? And I see it week in. Now, I will give him this. Before he got injured, it looked like he was turning a little bit of a corner.
Yeah, I was
I'll
going
give
to
him
say
that. I'll give him
so
that.
I wrote about it. I mentioned it on the Dolphins of that podcast as well. We literally just didn't see him. Like, I mean, he got hurt in the first half of the New England game. I thought it was fine. Obviously, when he came back, he struggled in that Texans game, and I kind of wonder, like, was he really, really fully back, or was he fully healthy at that point? It wasn't good. Like, the film wasn't good.
Yeah.
But we just didn't see him. Like, I was talking about it with some of the other media guys yesterday. Like, I didn't enter the 2022 season. I'll say this: I didn't leave training camp and preseason like thinking, oh, like this is like very worried. Like, obviously, he hasn't had the greatest tape in recent years, but I thought training camp preseason, like, he was fine. Like, I'll say he was fine. It wasn't something where he was like a glaring weak spot on the offensive line to me. So we just didn't really see much in 2022, and what we did see, he was injured and he came back, and there wasn't really the greatest game against the Texans there. So it's been a minute since we've like actually seen him like healthy and playing a full game. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, hey, like I said before, for better or for worse, I think Austin Jackson is going to be the starting right tackle, and Liam Eichenberg might be probably going to be the starting left guard as well, for better or for worse.
What do you think about the body transformation for Austin Jackson? And also, we haven't seen Liam Eichenberg. Did Liam Eichenberg look like he had little? Because I just talked about his functional strength.
I didn't really see him. Obviously, like I spoke with Austin Jackson for a while. I was at his media availability when he brought out to his one of the tables. I didn't really see Eichenberg, but I saw Jackson. I mean, he definitely looked slimmed down for sure, and that's one of the things he said that he said obviously it was a very frustrating year in terms of not being able to play and dealing with severe injuries that required surgery. But he was like, the one thing is that it really allowed me to work on my body, kind of really get into a groove in terms of my routine. How much will that impact him? How much will that help him? I'm sure a little bit. But I mean, he was honestly very forthcoming and very insightful, and acknowledged like, hey, they didn't pick up my fifth-year option. I didn't really play the year prior to that, so that just kind of is what it is. I got to get better at it. My plan is to get better. So he's very aware. He knows kind of the stigma, the noise. I mean, he just knows that he has to perform better. No way around it.
Let me ask you this: Are you worried a little? Were you worried a little bit when you heard about the reconstructive surgery on the ankle, just for when you're dealing with those bigger frames and lower extremity injuries, especially?
Not really. I mean, I will say though, like, so I believe it was a high ankle sprain, if I remember correctly. And it was just kind of interesting looking back, because I think the question was like, did he injure the same ankle or something like that? And McDaniel he essentially said like, yeah, it's the same ankle, but it's not the same injury, which I thought was kind of interesting. So then to hear him say that he had reconstructive surgery, I'm like, well, it's clear that something just wasn't right. I mean, for you to come back first game and you hurt it, you injure it again, I mean, something just wasn't right there. It doesn't bother me. I'm not really worried. I didn't really think too much of it because he was out there for the first day of the first week of OTAs. The Dolphins are very, very, very cautious, or at least under McDaniel, they've been very, very cautious with guys coming back from injuries. So if there was any doubt, they wouldn't have him out there. And I don't think he was limited. I think, I mean, obviously they're shuffling guys in and out, but he didn't look to be limited. So I don't think too much of the surgery. Obviously, it just kind of spoke to the significance of the injury last year.
I know you only had a brief look at them, but I know you've watched the tape and done the study on them. Your thoughts on the draft class, and specifically Devon Achane and Cam Smith. I was having to walk, I had to listen when that Cam Smith pick happened. We had almost 1,300 people live in the room here, and I was having to walk people off the ledges because of how talented Cam Smith is, right? Everyone just got their, I read a pretty good thread on it, Daniel. I don't know if you saw it. It's talking about like draft and endorphins, and how when everyone, you start researching players, you start locking in on certain players, you fall in love with
certain players. When you don't hear that name, and you're like, there's a negative reaction. You're like, yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the picks themselves, but also from what you saw at OTAs? Because I mean, everyone, including you guys over at the Herald, everyone was mentioning how explosive You know, and I had a couple of smart asses pop up in threads being like, oh, did they have him run between the tackles or blah, 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 blah. Like, you know, but it was clearly evident you guys were all stressing how explosive this man looked. And it was the guys who have been around, they hadn't seen this explosiveness since Reggie Bush was around. And this guy's a better pass catcher than Reggie Bush. What are your thoughts on the draft picks themselves? We'll start with those first two. And then what you saw at OTAs yesterday from them.
Yeah. I mean, it was clear early and often Devon Achane was involved in the offense. You know, when they drafted him, you know, there was a guy that, you know, I know Barry had really, you know, had really thrown some fire on, that being a guy that the Dolphins coveted. And as soon as they picked him, I was like, this isn't just a running back. Like, this is I've said it multiple times. He's an all-purpose playmaker. It's just like he's just like a get the ball in his hands type of guy. You know, today or yesterday, I should say, it was a lot in the passing game. I know he, you know, got behind the defender for a really long gain. So I'm sure like that's music to Mike McDaniel's ears. You know, seeing that, or to his eyes, I guess, seeing that, because and it's gonna be interesting to see the way this offense evolves in 2023, because obviously they still have Tyreek and Jalen, but you know, when you lose Trent and Sherfield and Mike Gesicki, who may not be, you know, like the biggest names, or maybe they weren't like uber productive, it's still 100, you know, over 100 targets that you have to replace, and I think that it's important for this offense to not be, you know, you want to be maybe Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle centric, but you don't want to be like over reliant and dependent on it. You know, God forbid any of them get hurt, or you know, you have a situation like the second half or the last month of the regular season where, you know, teams are doing more too high, you know, shells, and, you know, pressing them at the line. Like, you want somebody else to be able to step up. And I feel like the running backs were involved in the passing game, but it wasn't like overly like dynamic. Like, a lot of it was kind of, you know, hit Raheem or hit Jeff Wilson in the flats as like kind of like the outlet guy. And now you have, you know, Devon Achane and somebody who, you know, could potentially line up in the slider a little bit, kind of get creative. And obviously he's, you know, the fastest running back in the draft, so that's evident. Cam Smith, you know, again, it was a pick that was a surprise to many, surprise to me. But you know, I think there is potentially a real role for him. Obviously, he said that, you know, he was told he's going to work as an outside cornerback, and with the versatility of Jalen Ramsey kind of maybe taking up the star position that he's done in years past, close to the line of scrimmage. Yeah, you could see him. It kind of depends on, like, can he, you know, I guess kind of quote unquote beat out Cater, Kohu, and Nick Needham, who's working his way back at practice but not in team drills. You know, I didn't see like a ton. I know he made a nice play on the ball in team drills. I think Freddie Swain got behind him.
Yeah,
he made a nice. It was really just like a great catch. Honestly, it was good coverage, but just a great catch. So didn't see too much from him. I'm curious as it goes on. You know, just hopefully I don't get in trouble, but I'm curious to see as like it goes on, because, you know, this is typically the Vic Fangio's defense is one that's kind of majors in zone coverage and too high shells. Like, I feel like maybe it's not going to be like what it was in years past with Boyer and Flores, where, you know, you had a bunch of like cover threes and cover ones and zero blitzes where guys are kind of put on islands. So I'm kind of curious if like we do see him kind of get put on islands more. Obviously, you know, when they start doing one-on-ones, that'll be something to kind of look out for. He's not, I don't want to like make too much of a big deal out of one-on-ones, but, you know, it is notable and it is fun to watch. And, you know, he's a physical guy, but, you know, his coaches and others have said maybe he gets a little too physical sometimes. So, you know, just one day, but I'm excited to kind of see how he progresses.
Bro, man, you're gonna be so you're gonna be privy. This camp battle you're gonna be privy to between that offense and defense is gonna be something to behold. And we're gonna dig deep into the defense in a sec here, but let's stick with the offense, because you mentioned it, the receiver room. You know, Trent's gone, Gesicki's gone, those targets to make up. Man, I wanted Braxton Berrios last year, Daniel, and when we got him this year, I look at Braxton and he looks like that's the Bama receiver Tua likes. Like that, he, you know, he looks like the slot option that Tua is just gonna feed. And, you know, while Waddle and Hill are stressing defenses vertically, he's gonna kill you underneath horizontally. And Eric is a comma. I've been stressing all offseason because I know the work he's been putting in with the boys that perform, and I know how hard he's been out there and the chemistry he's building. Man, him and Robbie looks like it's gonna be that Robbie Braxton, you know, Izakama battle looks like it's going to be something to really behold to see who falls in 3, 4, 5. And I'm not mentioning Cedric Wilson, though, and he's got this guaranteed money, and I heard he had a strong day yesterday. How do you see – we might have one of the deepest wide receiver corps in the league. How do you see this playing out? Because I'm going to tell you this, Daniel. Chosen coming for a spot. He ain't playing around. He's coming for – he's hungry. He's motivated, and so it is Izakama. Because, Daniel, people were panicking last year. I had a co-host of one of my podcasts panicking, and I had to tell people, listen – Wes Welker went to Texas Tech. He knows how underutilized and how underexpanded these guys' route trees and how underdeveloped they are as route runners they are. If anyone knows how to get Izakama right, it's Welker. And then I heard you guys were pretty impressed with Izakama. I mean, I heard Omar even said he looked like NFL, like he was moving fluidly like an NFL starter. How do you see that wide receiver room? Because it's going to be one of the most interesting battles in camp. Daniel.
Not for sure. I mean, I know last week when I had like a spreadsheet where I was breaking down the roster by position, and I'm like doing the math. You didn't even mention River Craycraft.
No, and they love him, right?
Yeah, I mean, hey, he got elevated twice, through 2 or 3 times in the first month, caught 2 touchdown passes. Yep. He was pretty much wide receiver 3 until Trent really like controlled that and locked that down. I think River had some injuries late in the season too, but I mean, there's legitimately like 7 guys who you could viably see on the roster. I mean, obviously you got the locks like Tyreek and Jalen, but after that, it's kind of up in the air, like who is going to be that number 3 guy. I'll say this, regardless of, how it develops. So yesterday was probably like a great first impression because Tyreek wasn't there, but it's not like the offense really kind of skipped a beat. Obviously the defense won its reps, the offense won its reps, but it was good to see like it wasn't just like, oh, Jalen hit Jalen. Like you said, Robbie Chosen made some plays. Eric Izakama looked good. Truthfully, Eric looked great in training camp last year, so it's not really much of a surprise. I think more.
Were you surprised he wasn't activated last year from what you saw?
Well, from what I saw, yes, in training camp, I was very, very surprised. But then when you hear Wes Welker talk about how he was essentially – so how it went was Eric was essentially supposed to be Tyreek's backup. Mm-hmm. But Tyreek, was playing virtually every play. So, you have that. And then you have, the slot, and you have kind of like the F tight end position, but Trent did a lot of that as well. So you had Cedric, and then you had Cedric and Trent who were kind of like doing that slot F stuff as well, and River was in the mix as well. And like just like they had him as Tyreek's position. I think it was X or Z. I forgot which one. But then they later on in training camp and the regular season, they were like, all right, we want you to start learning the slot position to try to be Cedric's backup as well. So it just kind of became a numbers game. That's why you saw Braylon Sanders get put up a little bit. So I don't necessarily have, and like you said, like it was a big transition for him because at Texas Tech, he said it like it was a lot of not just the route tree, but the system and the scheme where like he's getting a lot of calls via signs and signals and stuff like that. And then he's like, all right, now I got to go into the huddle and it's a 10-word play call, and I got to figure out what I'm going to do. And you even saw it in that regular season finale where sometimes he may have had a mishap in terms of lining up and motioning and stuff like that. So it was a lot to kind of ask of him in year 1 to learn 2 different positions as well as kind of adjust to the NFL play calling scheme. But nonetheless, he looked really good in first open practice. He had a nice little sideline grab. Like you said, Braxton Berrios. It's going to be interesting to see if he can kind of unlock, the Dolphins offense. Like I said, like they were very, very proficient in the middle of the field, intermediate part of the field, but not a lot kind of in that short middle part of the field. The flats were a spot that I think that they hit well with, sometimes with Gesicki or Smythe and the running backs, but like that short middle part of the field. I think that that's a part that they can take advantage of because Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are stressing like the deep part and middle part of the field. So, so you have a lot of guys. I mean, I really don't even want to count out River Craycraft because again, he's a guy and he's just a guy who McDaniel trusts. So it's like if anything, they know he can go in there and he can be solid. He might not be explosive, he might not be the greatest athlete out there, but he's in the right spot. And I feel like that's the most important thing. Like Wes Welker said it, like he's like, when he talked about Eric last year, he said, I can't put a guy out there. And I don't know that, I don't know if they're going to I'm unsure if they're going to line up in the right spot. Are they going to be able to motion when they're supposed to motion? Are they going to run the right route? Like with River, there's no question about that. So there's a lot of options. Something's going to have to shake, whether it's Cedric trade, whether it's, I don't know, something's going to have to shake because they're not, unless you're going to keep 7 wide receivers. And I don't know if that's really the way they want to go with the way the roster is constructed.
So let me ask you this, because we've talked about 2 players that are probably going to have a big impact on us before we get to defense. Special teams, a lot of us, were surprised that Danny Crossman still has a job. Yeah. And, I guess it was a matter of, a lot of the guys he was depending on, like Keon Crossman and such, got pulled to other and had to fill in for injuries, and injuries depleted special teams because a lot of guys were taken away from it and needed in other areas. Do you think Devon Achane and Braxton Berrios in the return game can totally flip this unit around and potentially extend a guy like Danny Crossman's shelf life? Because the speed they have, Daniel, we could go from a team that never tilted the field with special teams and never shifted and took advantage of field position to now one of the speedier and better teams that can do that. How do you foresee special teams working out with Achane and Braxton Berrios added to the mix now?
Yeah, it's going to be curious to see. What they actually do once we start getting the preseason games. Because I guess last year it was most of the kick returner and then punt returner. Who did they have? I mean, they had Cedric. Yeah, Cedric in the second half. But I don't even remember where they had the first half.
Yeah, either way.
The return game was just really non-existent. Yeah. So now, I mean, I think I'm assuming, I'm under the assumption that Braxton. I think Braxton's spot on the roster is pretty like. I'd be very surprised if he didn't make the 53-man roster. When you sign a guy that early in free agency, it's clear that you covet the player and you have like a defined role for them. Even last year, like they signed Trent Sherfield pretty early in the free agency process, and he was kind of just like seen as like a cast off. And I'm like, wait, like he knows McDaniel. They're not signing this guy in the first week of free agency, like just to sign him. Like there's something there. So it seems like he's probably going to be the punt returner. Achane, maybe the kick returner, but Braxton is a former All-Pro returner. Maybe they kind of just like let them have some tries in preseason and see how it goes. So yeah, I mean, any boost to the return game will be like, I mean, literally anything they can get out of the return game is something, because they didn't get anything last year. Truthfully, probably more important is like the kicking game and coverage. Because I thought Morstead was good in terms of punt coverage. I mean, punting. Coverage was pretty solid in terms of punt coverage, because I thought Bethel and Crossen were. I mean, I don't watch every single team in the NFL, but I think they're probably 2 of the best gunners in the NFL. But it was just like Sanders was just a little, just not consistent enough. And obviously, like when you get paid what he gets paid and you're a former All-Pro, like, I mean, hey, standards are the standards and they're high. But also the kick coverage as well. And, I know like Seaton Carter got knocked out with a concussion the first game of the season, and, Crossen maybe wasn't playing as many snaps. So maybe that played a role. But kicking is fickle, but you got to have it. Like, I just imagine, how much better the Dolphins would have been if, Sanders makes 1 or 2 kicks and maybe some crucial spots or whatnot. You got to get more consistency there. I think I'm more kind of concerned about Jason Sanders, being consistent in the coverage as opposed to the return game, especially with the way like some of these new rules are. I know I don't know if you saw, but they passed the rule about fair catching on kickoffs. And I think that that's going to result in less opportunities to return kicks. So like you're not seeing a lot of teams with like consistent dynamic return games. I think there's only 1 or 2 punt returns and kickoff returns last year. So I'm more concerned about actually kicking in the kickoff coverage.
Let me ask you this, because I haven't actually heard your opinion on this, I don't think. But guys like Omar seem to be writing off Michael Turk. And I'm sitting here being like, whoa. It's the same thing you just mentioned with Sanders, with Jake Bailey, All-Pro a couple years ago. Now, he did have that issue with the Patriots that they resolved financially and all that stuff going on. But are you with me? Are you not writing off Michael Turk that quickly? I mean, we're talking this guy 28, 30 reps at 225, like kicker, and you see the hang time, you see the legs on this guy, you see, the bloodline, plus he's a young, cheaper option.
Yeah.
How do you see that? Do you think Michael Turk has a legitimate shot here?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think they definitely invested some money. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they gave Bailey some they gave him some guaranteed money.
Yeah, it's like
He's the vet.
1.6 or something, wasn't it?
1 point. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's the right number. Like
something like that. It's something in there.
They gave him some guaranteed money, and I'll say like the Dolphins. I don't think they want to throw away money. Like every dollar counts, every penny counts. Is it possible? Yeah, but I just tend to kind of roll with the vet. I think maybe it's a little easier for a special, especially an undrafted specialist, to kind of unseat a veteran. But again, it's like I think a lot of times like they're going to defer to the vet unless Turk is he's
just
clearly
booming.
better than Jake Bailey. I think it could be the guy.
Okay, you saw the Jets are bringing in the punt god today, eh?
Crazy, yeah.
You saw that. So okay, let's switch to defense then. A UDFA I'm pretty high on before we start getting into the nitty gritty here is Aubrey Miller Jr. Loved what I saw at Jackson State when I dove into all 22 is really hard to find, but I found the Campbell game. I just love what I saw from him. What are your thoughts on that linebacking group? Because you get you look at David Long. I think, we're talking about a top 10, top 12 linebacker when he's healthy there, and the value they got that contract off. I mean, Greer deserves a standing applause for that alone. Jerome Baker, a guy who I'm not the biggest fan of, right? Not the best at stacking and shedding, getting off blocks, not overly instinctual. He really flashes with pursuit speed and as an off-ball blitzer. But I will always give him credit. He's gotten better every year. For a 4.3 wide 9 he's gotten better every year when he's been technically out of position. I give him credit. He's gotten better every year. You look at the traits, and those are the traits Fangio would love in his defense as well. So you look past David Long and him. You got Andrew Van Ginkel now kicked in the inside linebacker.
Yeah.
You got Omar Kelly saying Channing Tindall looks invisible. And we were already asking questions about when we all found out AVG was kicked inside. The question you knew that was going to come up, Daniel, is this an indictment on where Channing Tindall is at? Because all of us are aware that he publicly admitted he had a real hard time grasping the defense last year. Now we're moving to a new scheme, new terminology. You got to automatically think it resets. And then you got Duke Riley, and then not a lot of else. What are your thoughts? Because Aubrey Miller offers you a lot on special teams, which we were just talking about. How do you see this interior linebacker unit? Do you see a UDFA like him stepping up? I believe, was it Zeke Vandenberg said he's being cross-trained inside now, more so with them? Do you see a UDFA stepping up, or do you see them maybe going out post-June 1st when the money frees up and adding to that core? Or do you think they status quo? How do you see that? Because that might be our weakest. That is our weakest unit on defense, right?
Well, so I believe they took 4. Correct me if I'm wrong. They took 4 inside linebackers. It was on the roster last year. It was Jerome, Landon, Duke Riley, 5, Sam McGuavin and Channing Tindall.
Yeah.
Duke obviously kind of rotating in as on passing situations as kind of a coverage guy. Sam more of a special team guy. So they had 5. Yeah. I think there's 4 locks to make the roster with David Long, Jerome, Duke, and Channing. So yeah, I mean, I think there is a possible space for Aubrey Miller, more so as a special teams guy. Because they do have to. I'm looking at the roster and I'm like, all right, there are certain guys who I know are definitely going to make the roster. But I was like, who's going to fill like some of these special team spots? Because there's some guys who like just aren't going to play special teams, and they do have to replace some guys that are left. Obviously, Sam is one of those guys. I think Landon was on special teams sometimes as well. So they do there is a space maybe if he can carve out a lane as a special teamer. I think Andrew Van Ginkel cross-training at inside linebacker could kind of mess up the numbers, so to speak. Because one of the things that McDaniel mentioned was that it not only adds flexibility for it not only disguises looks and kind of troubles offensive IDing protections and whatnot, but it also allows for flexibility on the active, game day roster when you have 48 guys up. And in turn, you can kind of project that out to, the 53-man roster as well. So again, there's a lot of talent. There's going to be a lot. I mean, there's going to be some guys who are like good enough to make the roster that just aren't going to make the roster because of the numbers. And I wonder if, Andrew, Van Ginkel playing more inside linebacker, that possibility, like that option. I wonder if maybe that allows them to kind of, play a numbers game where it's like, all right, they don't keep a fifth true inside linebacker because they're gonna have a lot of edge guys that play. I mean, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Malik Reed, and then you got Van Ginkel. Agba is kind of like an edge that can also, edge / interior lineman type of guy. So there's a lot of guys there. So maybe, to do a numbers game, you keep more edges, but, you keep Van Ginkel as a guy who can play both spots. So there's a possibility there. I think that I won't say surprised if they bring in a veteran inside linebacker, a guy, because I do think that their top three is pretty solid. Like, regardless of what you want to say about, I know Jerome's probably one of the more polarizing guys on the Dolphins, but he is there every day. You more or less know what you're going to get from him. David Long, like you said, I mean, he's one of the better inside linebackers in the game. More so with him, it's just been kind of injuries, and I think that it's clear. Oh, it's clear that they really like Duke. They not only brought him back, they gave him a 2-year deal. So they really like him there. Channing, he's in a weird spot, especially if Van Ginkel starts to take some of those inside linebacker spots reps.
And he's not a Fangio guy, Daniel. So
I don't. I mean, but at the same time, I'm not sure if Jerome is like the greatest fit for Fangio as well, because you mentioned how he might sometimes has troubles getting off blocks and traffic, light boxes. You need linebackers who can get off those blocks. When I would say Channing, I just didn't see him in team drills, and that's the only thing I would say. Like to Omar's comment, like I just didn't see him, and I mentioned that I didn't see him in team drills. But there are a lot of guys I didn't see in team drills for whatever reason that may be. So it's just one practice. I don't want to overreact to it, but it is something to
monitor,
to kind of monitor and look out for the fact that Van Ginkel was going to play more inside linebacker when you have a former third.
Because I think he's going to be good, Daniel. We've been talking about that move on this channel since Flores was here. He's got the instincts. He shows the ability in coverage.
He can rush too.
Yeah, I think Van Ginkel is actually going to work out. Like, I actually think this is going to work out. The front, Daniel. You mentioned all those great names. It's stacked. But who's behind Raekwon Davis? Jenkins is gone. They guaranteed $100,000 to Brandon Pilley. Yeah. Love dived into the USC film. Loved what I saw. Love the potential. What do you see going there? Do you see? I mean, if they don't add a veteran, it's a pretty easy path for Brandon Pilley, considering they guaranteed him $100,000. Yeah. They also, I don't know if you saw, but Aubrey Miller's numbers came out. They guaranteed him. They signed him to like a 3-year, just under $3 million deal. Yeah. So with Brandon Pilley and this defensive tackle, how do you see this playing out? Could that be something where maybe they go get him an Akeem Hicks or someone who used to be under Fangio that's still out there? There's a couple of guys. How do you see that playing?
Yeah, that's the one. That's like the one remaining move that I've just been kind of waiting for. Because again, they have had a lot of veteran depth behind Raekwon over the past couple of years. I think that was a pretty good day for the defensive front as a whole, not just the edge guys, but the interior guys. Zach Sealer wasn't there as well, so it's really an opportunity. He wasn't at the open OTA practice, so it was an opportunity for some of the young guys to step up. They were active. Jalen Twyman was on the practice squad last year. He was in the middle of a couple of run stuffs and whatnot. He was getting the vets kind of hyped up when he was in there, so that was good to see. But yeah, I mean, if there's one signing, obviously we're going to talk about another perspective or prospect that the Dolphins can make in the coming weeks. But if there's one veteran position that I think that they could address, once the cap savings from the Byron Jones cut comes in, it's nose tackle, or veteran nose tackle, just somebody who can kind of take up take some snaps behind Raekwon, and like you said, the first name that came to mind was Akeem Hicks, because Fangio's system, he can move around a little bit. I don't know if he's maybe like a true nose tackle, but he can move around and do some things that fit Fangio's scheme, because he's been in this game. But I mean, they have good depth overall. I mean, they might not have might not have a clear backup to to Raekwon, but I mean they can move Sealer around a little bit sometimes. I mean, maybe Christian, but they have guys that they can rotate in and out for sure.
That front, I'm telling you, that might be one of the most talented fronts when you add the edges, the outside linebackers into that. Like that might be one of the most talented fronts in the NFL, if not the most talented. It's disgusting when you like, and then you look at our secondary and you're like, how is this team compiled like this? It's crazy. Let's talk about the front a little bit more. Raekwon Davis, he's into a year where he doesn't have they didn't activate his 5th-year option, right? And
Well, he was a second round pick.
Oh, sorry, yeah, second round pick.
No 5th-year
he,
option, but contract year last year.
Contract year, I apologize. Yeah, he's into a contract year right now. And Wilkins, no contract worked out. Zach Seiler's not far behind. Well, he'll need new money, right? Then you got Ogba taking up the cost he's taking up right now. I mean, let's start with Wilkins and Raekwon Davis. How do you see this pan out? Because, I mean, do you see Raekwon in a prove-it year? And how do you see the big elephant in the room, this Christian Wilkins thing panning out? Because the longer it goes, you see all this market being listen, I don't know if you're with me, Daniel, but this interior defensive line money has been crazy this offseason. Remember last year where the market was like 14-15 million for Christian? Now it's like 22. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Wilkins and Raekwon Davis with extensions?
Yeah, I'll start with Christian. I wrote a story maybe a month or two ago after Jeffrey Simmons got paid because he was in the same draft class as Christian. And I'm like, I just pretty much compare the numbers in terms of stats for Christian and some of his contemporaries who've gotten paid. And it's an interesting kind of debate and kind of just topic because it is very clear that Christian is one of the Dolphins' best, not just defensive players, but players as a whole. But the philosophical question is, how much do you pay for an interior defensive lineman who is very, very good against the run, but maybe not top of his position as a pass rusher? People kind of saying that, interior defensive lineman is becoming more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? A premium position because for the guys who can pass rush, Chris Jones, Aaron Donald, those types of guys. And when you stack up the numbers, I know, different counting sites have different stats, but either way you slice it up, he kind of falls short, Christian being, in terms of the pass rush production. So the question is, like, how much do you pay him? I mean, I think 4 guys now, or 5 maybe, have gotten $20 million, $20 million per year contracts this offseason at the IDL position. So the question is, like, the going rate for a top defensive tackle is close to $20 million. There's a lot of people that say that's way too much, but I'm like, the market is the market. A couple years ago, Vita Vea got 17 mil. I think, who was it? Not Jerome Payne, but his teammate with Washington. I'm blanking on his name right now. He got about $17-18 million a couple years back. I mean, the market is the market. Like, there's no way around it. Like you said, there's no doubt that Christian's one of their better players. He's gotten better every year, but that is just kind of maybe. I think to me, that's kind of like the biggest sticking point in the negotiation, because it's clear that he deserves a raise and he's one of the better players at his position. But it's like, all right, if the pass rush production isn't there, can you justify giving him $20 million? That's not for me to say either way. I don't like saying what guys should or shouldn't make.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that's kind of what the internal debate is. But I do think that they'll figure something out. They'll keep him.
Well, doesn't Zach Seiler make it a little bit more of an interesting debate? Because I'm sure you look at the entire numbers.
Well, again, looking ahead a year, there's going to be some. I mean, I know people are saying there's a 2-3 year window. Yes and no, because their cap situation is not very good. I mean, it's not good for 2024. And they don't have a lot of guys under contract, but they also don't have a lot of cap space. They've been pushing money back for multiple years now. They did it this offseason with restructuring Tyreek, Teron, and I think they restructured somebody else's contract, and Bradley Chubb, I believe. So like they're pushing money down. They're gonna have to pay for it eventually. And there's a lot of guys that are coming up for contracts that, frankly, I don't know if they can't keep everybody. Like, it's not how it goes. I know you can structure, push money down the road. You can't keep everybody. So you have Christian, you have Raekwon, you have Zach Sealer. You have Agbo, who, his money isn't guaranteed after this upcoming season. Do they keep him? I know there was rumblings and kind of rumors and speculation, but they were always going to keep him this year because the money was guaranteed and he's coming off an injury. You got Jalen Phillips, who technically can sign an extension after the 2023 season. Like, they can't keep everybody. So there's going to have to be some tough discussions and tough decisions made with that defensive front.
Yeah, I just say Zach Sealer makes it difficult because he offers you similar production against the run, but he offers you a bit more of a pass rush, right? Like that's why, and he'll probably be cheaper. That's why it's just an interesting conversation to compare the two. You know what I mean? I got to ask you this, before we get into potential post June 1st moves here. I know you've been seeing it, Daniel. Listen, it took a concussion against Green Bay for Aaron Rodgers to get on the same playing field and level as Tua last year. Is the media overlooking Tua Tagovailoa because Aaron Rodgers has arrived?
I mean, yes and no. Because I feel like I mentioned it in the tweet a couple of weeks ago. Because of all the quarterback ranking conversations, I don't really care for that, to be honest. But it just kind of piqued my interest because I had seen something like over and over with the way that people were talking about, like, my counterparts were talking about Tua, and I'm like, I feel like in terms of the production that Tua showed last year, there really wasn't any way to discount it. And that's how I felt entering the season. I was like, I think the numbers he's going to put, like, you can't really deny the numbers. What I think is kind of tricky is that I feel like some people, again, I feel like some people don't want to admit that they were wrong about Tua and about the Dolphins and about who he is. So as a result, maybe you say, all right, well, he's a product of having the two fastest receivers in the NFL. He's a product of Mike McDaniel's play call. He's a product of this and that. And I mean, to an extent, yeah, because every quarterback is, to an extent, a product of the talent they have around them. But you got to give him credit for going out there and producing. And really, the injury is the only thing that you can say at this point. Because if it's not that, then you just think that he's just going to fall off his production. And I don't think that. So obviously, New York is New York. That's, the biggest, media center in the country, world, really. It just is what it is. And Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Fame polarizing quarterback on, one of the biggest markets and biggest franchises in the NFL. So I just kind of naturally, I think it's just kind of a natural reaction to, one of the biggest offseason moves we've seen, maybe the history of the NFL. I don't think too much of it. I do think that the Jets are going to be good and they're going to be very competitive. I think maybe they're a little overhyped, especially in the context of the AFC. I honestly don't think.
I agree.
I think the Dolphins
are going to battle the Bills for second, if you want my honest opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to give no hot takes because I'm not happy. Maybe another day, but yeah.
I will say this: you're a film guy. Can you admit this though? Wouldn't you take Elijah Moore over every other receiver they've added behind Garrett Wilson?
Probably, yeah. That trade surprised me. I know they got Lazard, who's Rodgers' guy, and they brought Cole Hardman in there, who's kind of more of a 3/2 at this point. But they have talent. I'll put it this way: the Jets were competitive with the worst quarterback situation in the AFC. They won like 7 games last year with like the 3 worst quarterbacks in the AFC. Yeah. They have a very good defense that I don't think there's going to be much regression from that group. And they're getting healthier on the offensive line and getting some skill. Like it's a good team. Like there's no way around it. And just having Rodgers in there should be a boost. But like I don't see them as like this 13-14 win team. Like they're going to have to be in a dogfight with the rest of the AFC East and the rest of the AFC. So that's just kind of how it is. Like I don't think that they're heads and shoulder. Like it's really the Chiefs and everyone else is like gunning for them. Like nothing has changed, and it just kind of depends on who you like. Some people might think the Bills are the second best team. Some people I think the Bengals. People might think the Dolphins, the Ravens, the Jets. Like it just kind of depends on what your flavor is.
I think the Bills are going to regress. I think losing Leslie Frazier and one of the key pieces of their defense in Tremaine Edmonds, I think it's going to hurt them a lot more than people are giving it credit. Leslie Frazier to me is going to be a big loss. I think they're going to regress. I think, you want my honest opinion, I think they might have missed their window. Because I think
I was
if they don't
thinking
win
that.
this year, Stephon Diggs, it looks like he's going to be saying, "Thank you very much. I'm out."
Yeah, I mean, I was actually thinking about that too. Like, I mean, the Bills have been touted as, this kind of, I mean, at least last year, I think they were maybe the betting favorites out of the AFC, and they were kind of viewed as like this close to juggernaut type team. And, I think they definitely fell short of expectations. The margins in the NFL, I mean, in the AFC are like, they're razor thin.
Yeah.
Like, again, you could legitimately have a debate for 4 or 5 teams being second best, just kind of projecting second best behind the Chiefs, whether it's the Dolphins, the Bills, the Jets, the Bengals, the Ravens. Like, I wouldn't surprise me if any of those teams kind of like emerge from the pack to challenge the Chiefs, because I think that's just how much talent and how good the quarterback play is in the conference.
I agree. All right, man. Finally, before we get out of here, post June 1st, a lot of people are talking about it. It's been talked about on this channel quite a bit. I want to get your thoughts on the whole Dalvin Cook situation. Obviously, we know his agent stirred the pot when he alluded to, without alluding to, the interest between both parties on that podcast a couple weeks ago. What are your thoughts on the whole Dalvin Cook situation? Because my whole thing is, listen, they're throwing everything but the kitchen sink. Well, sorry, everything and the kitchen sink to try and win this year. Dalvin Cook adds another unstoppable layer. I think him, Achane, and Wilson and Mostert would be a nasty combination, considering Mostert and Wilson haven't been able to stay healthy. So you got to have insurance policies. What are your thoughts on the whole Dalvin Cook thing?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with what Barry has reported. I guess a couple months ago, kind of earlier in free agency, like there were some talks, but I think it was more so kind of some of the trade compensation for that. There's also kind of the elephant in the room, like being the fact that he has a couple years left on the deal, but I think after this year, I think only $2 million is
guaranteed. He's only got $2 million guaranteed,
and nothing after that. So I mean, any trades, kind of like with Ramsey, like when you traded for Ramsey,
exactly.
Part of that was like kind of the understanding that you're gonna have to rework the deal. So, and just kind of my guess is that like the Vikings probably wanted like some 2024 picks, and the Dolphins were like, nah, because we haven't had picks for the last 2 years, like we want to keep this, especially with it may not being a long-term kind of relationship with Dalvin Cook. I'll say this, a lot of smoke around that. I do question though, like in the context of what the Dolphins are doing on offense and what they have, is the juice worth the squeeze? Because regardless of how much people may want McDaniel to run the ball more, this is still going to be an offense that ranks top 5, top 10 in passing attempts. It's still going to be an offense where the priority is getting the ball in the hands of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I think that Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert are probably underrated in terms of what they did for the offense, especially in the second half of the season. They stacked some really good games against, I think, the Bears, the Browns, the Bills game where Raheem Mostert went crazy without Jeff. I think they're a bit probably underrated in terms of what they did. Obviously, there's injury risk with Raheem and whatnot, but you have those two guys still in the fold. You have Achane. This is a guy who McDaniel was like wanted to draft in the second round. So they clearly have a vision and a role for him. I just question like everything that would come with, like, even if you don't make a trade for him, even if you wait till after June 1, what deal would you have to give him? Is it like how much does it make you like that much better? He's gonna make the team better, but I'm like in the context of what they're seeking to do. Like it'd be different if the Dolphins didn't have any depth and they wanted to be a team that runs the ball 30 times a game. And it's like, all right, we're gonna get Dalvin Cook and we're gonna run the ball 25 times a game. Like that's just not gonna happen. So I do wonder like how much impact there'd be. He makes the team better. He's a good player, but it's like in the context of the offense, their values and what they have right now, is it really worth all of that? That's my one question.
So like, is he gonna get the snaps deemed worth the investment, and also
correct? Yes.
Is it worth taking those snaps away from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle? That's what we're basically where we're at.
I'd say more so, and people would definitely differ in opinion on this, but it's not, I wouldn't even say taking the ball out of the hands of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. It's more so taking the ball out of the hands of Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson and Devon Achane, who with Mostert and Wilson, they both averaged like 4.5 yards per carry. Like they were two of the most efficient running backs in the NFL, behind what a lot of people would say is a below average offensive line. Like I don't think that the talent they have is like a severe problem. I think that the offensive line was more of a any running issues. I think was more of a product of the offensive line. And the talent that they have in the backfield. So,
like, do you expect Raheem to be a little bit more explosive this year? Because he never really looked like he was fully recovered from that ACL too, right? Usually it takes a little bit, and then you have to prepare the regular season. So do you expect him to have, because it didn't look like he had that home run threat that he usually had, and maybe it's because he's not fully recovered. Do you expect him to be even a little bit more explosive this year?
I mean, that's the hope. I mean, people always talk about how when you're that 1 year removed from the ACL, you feel a little more confident, you feel a little more fresh and whatnot. So you would hope. And then Jeff, Jeff's gonna have an entire year in the system. Like Jeff was really, really good.
Yeah, he was.
It's like it's so weird because I really think highly of the running game, but then you look at the numbers and you're like, how are they bottom like 5 in the NFL? And part of that is like because they just throw the ball so much. For me, it's not so much more like the counting stats; it's more like the efficiency and like running the ball well in critical spots. So when you get to 3rd and 1, like they should be able to run the ball with Jeff Wilson or Raheem or whoever it is and get that more times than not. They shouldn't have to put Tua in the shotgun or the pistol and throw the ball on 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 3. Like they should be able to pick up those yards. So it's more so like efficiency and run the ball in like high leverage situations.
Agreed. All right, brother. I appreciate you coming on. The guys are back at it tomorrow, right? For OTAs. Are you guys going to be there?
Not just one open practice per week. So I think next Wednesday we'll be there for the 2nd open practice.
Awesome. Man, tell everyone where they can find you and what you got coming up. Anything you want to plug? Here's your chance, brother.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Miami Herald, MiamiHerald.com. Subscribe to check out all my work, all Barry's work, obviously all of our other sports writers' work. We got a lot going on in South Florida, not just the Dolphins. Really, I feel like the Dolphins are kind of a footnote right now because the Heat and the Panthers are doing their thing. So definitely want to subscribe to the Miami Herald, Dolphins in Depth podcast every week on YouTube, as well as Apple, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. Got a story coming up this week just on some ways that the offense can improve. We did speak about that a lot, so kind of putting that on wax, some ways they can improve. And then again, next week we have, next OTA practice. We'll see who's there, who's not. And, we'll have recaps and, full on coverage.
Can't wait. Guys, over 360 of you in the room right now. Please smash the like button on your way out. I'll be live tomorrow at around 5 p.m. for another episode of Fin Too Deep with Neil. And until then, guys, everyone stay happy, healthy, safe, and blessed. You got the Heat game tomorrow. You got the Panthers tonight that they got the brooms out and they can finish it off. So, man, what a time to be alive in the 305 right now. I mean, that's for sure. So hopefully, I'm gonna tell you, Daniel, the hype is real even around OTAs for this team. I can't wait till training camp. It's gonna be a fun offseason. Then I can't wait to have you back on. Appreciate you for coming on, good sir, and awesome time chopping up football with you. Again, as always, guys, fins up, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a fantastic evening, everyone.